Great, so we'll call the regular meeting of Township Council for the purpose of public hearing and development permits for Monday, June 26th to order. Of course, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our special relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. So with that, Ms. Bauer, you want to read the preamble? You finally have this recorded now?
A public hearing is a statutory requirement under Section 464 of the Local Government Act and must be held before third reading of a community plan, land use contract amendment bylaw, heritage designation bylaw, or heritage revitalization agreement bylaw. During a public hearing, council acts in a quasi-judicial role for the purpose of allowing persons who believe their interest in property is affected by a bylaw, permit, or other matter to make representations to council either orally, by written submission, or to add comments to or elaborate upon correspondence that may have already been presented to council concerning the bylaws. It is important to note that council is not able to receive any additional information on the bylaws following the public hearing as dictated by case law. The hearing procedure involves an explanation from the Community Development Division on the purpose of the proposed bylaws and to hear from individuals regarding the bylaws. In order to ensure that all interested parties have a reasonable opportunity to be heard, speakers are requested to keep representations as brief and succinct as possible and no longer than 5 minutes in duration, excluding the time required for questions from council. Speakers will be asked to state their name, neighborhood, and city for the record. And if referring to prepared remarks, to submit copies of these to the township clerk. Decorum must be always maintained. This includes refraining from applause, booing, or heckling. To assist with large numbers of speakers, individuals must advise the township clerk and sign the speakers list prior to the commencement of the public hearing. The names on the speakers list will be read out during the hearing. Individuals who have already addressed council and wish to add further submissions will wait until the people that have not yet addressed council have had an opportunity to speak. All submissions and speaker lists are considered part of the public record. Council members should not express their views nor debate the bylaws. However, they may question speakers to clarify particular points in their submissions. Council may consider third reading or third reading and final adoption at this meeting or at its next regular meeting. Thank you.
That get a motion, please, to adopt and receipt of agenda items. Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Martins. Call the question on the agenda. All right, carries unanimously. Move on to item C1. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The subject Willoughby Community Plan and Northeast Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan amendments and rezoning applications pertain to a proposed residential development consisting of approximately 349 townhouse units at 7240 and 7258 210th Street, 21031, 21133, 21156, and 21081 72nd Avenue, and lands in the 21300 block of 72nd Avenue. The 17.12 acre site is designated residential and suburban residential in the Willoughby Community Plan and special study area in the Northeast Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan. This air photo depicts a site located north of 72nd Avenue between 210th Street and Smith Crescent. Proposed Willoughby Community Plan and Northeast Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 5836 designates the site multifamily in the Willoughby Community Plan and includes the site as a development permit area, and designates the site Townhouse A in the Northeast Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan. Proposed rezoning bylaw 5837 amends the existing suburban residential SR2 zoning to comprehensive development zone 176 to accommodate townhouses at a maximum density of 22 units per acre. This slide indicates the proposed preliminary site plan with vehicular access from 210 Street and Smith Crescent. Staff recommends support of Willoughby Community Plan and Northeast Gordon Estate Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 5836 and rezoning Bylaw 5837, subject to 16 conditions listed on page 10 of Council's agenda. Your worship, total of 302 notices were mailed out, 33 written submissions have been received, and there are 7 individuals noted on the speakers list. The first 2 are Diane Ross and Joseph Camo, and then the next list individual is Glenn Smith.
Diane Ross here. Can you please come forward?
Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My husband and I will be co-presenting. My name is Diane Ross, and my husband is Joseph Como. With our family, we reside at 21225 Crush Crescent. Our property is at the corner of Crush and Smith, running parallel along Smith to the end of the proposed development and detention pond. A small corner of the detention pond is along our neighbor's property. We are strongly opposed to the proposed development in its current form, although we understand the need for additional housing and could support under safe conditions higher density to the upper half of the proposed development. As the slope is significantly steeper on the lower half along Crush to Smith, we suggest lower density and more green space. Steep terrain can be susceptible to landslides if the ground becomes unstable or saturated. This is a major concern as we see streams that flow down the street during normal seasonal rain events and wonder about our vulnerability in a serious rain event like the Fraser Valley had in 2021. The removal of 502 trees with established intertwining root systems and replacing less of them with younger trees that will require years of growth to be as effective leaves us vulnerable in our own home. I'm not an expert. I don't have a degree on geoengineering, but I have been a resident on this land since 1962. I understand the composition of the soil on my property and some of my neighbors that border us. There is a large quantity of clay under a small layer of topsoil. It is my understanding that clay will, on a steep slope, can lead to instability. Current drainage issues have reduced the top layer of our soil for ourselves alone. It is my understanding that a geotech report is required with this development. However, there are still concerns with the follow-up to damage and safety to us and our property and structures during the improvements to the road, proposed traffic light, construction of the development, and the development itself. That could lead to a stabilization of the slope and structures above us. I'll leave this to my husband next.
To continue with the point on water flow, we have concerns about how paving over that much and building over that much land will leave us susceptible to more water coming down onto our property, which is directly downhill from this development. We already have issues. A good third of our land is swamp grass now. How much more water will there be? How are they going to guarantee that this water is going to go into the detention pond they're going to have? And what happens when that detention pond overflows? The slopes of the land would lead us to conclude that it's going to go down Smith, and our neighbors in that direction already have issues during rain events with flooding at the corners as well as at Glover Road. And I'm sure they'll address that in further comments. The other issue, or another issue that we really have, and I really have, is my concern with increased traffic. There's only going to be 2 entrances to this development, one off 210 and one off Crush Crescent just above our house. Any houses coming, or any people coming from 216, Glover Road, 2 32nd exits to return home to that area are likely going to use Smith Crescent because it's just more convenient. But Smith Crescent is a narrow farming road. There are no shoulders, no sidewalks, and even though this development is supposed to include upgrading the road, it is only to the end of the development that there will be a widening of the road and sidewalks. Right now, that road is a safe walk for my wife and I when we walk our dog or not. It's a nice walk, it's pleasant, it's quiet. That will disappear. And my wife mentioned traffic lights at Crush and Smith. And my first winter living there, driving a four-wheel drive down that hill in the snow, I could not make a left turn into my driveway. It is impossible to gear down or slow down enough to make that turn. If you put a traffic light there, it is a truck route, it's an emergency vehicle route. What's going to happen when somebody coming off Smith has a green light and somebody coming down that hill in a dump truck cannot stop? Something I think you should be concerned about with developing that. With that, I would like to thank the mayor and Councillor Pratt for visiting with us a couple of weeks ago, and thank you for listening.
Just I have a question from council, and I do appreciate you taking the time. When I came out there to meet with you, I do appreciate it. It was very helpful to walk it. Yeah. Councillor Richter.
Yes, thank you both very much. Two questions. Number one, on this map here, which property is yours?
We're directly below, so we're,
On that one, 212 foot, that's it
That's us.
there.
That's
212,
us.
So you're
25.
like literally
Yes,
directly.
oh yeah.
we're
Okay.
right there.
And Ms. Ross, you had mentioned you'd lived in that area since 1962.
Yes.
Have you seen issues in the past with any kind of mudslides or slope slides, or is it just excessive water that's coming down?
So far, it's just excessive water.
Excessive water.
And when it was clearing done above that property a few years ago, and our neighbors will confirm this, the amount of water coming down increased significantly, just with the clearing of that one area above us. Clearing more is going to bring more water down.
Okay, and the water you say now runs along Smith Crescent out to Crush Crescent?
No, it'll run northeast and then southeast at the
Okay.
corner.
At the corner.
Until it gets to Glenn Smith's property where it runs in a stream, and that stream has, during rain events, has increased in size from about 20 feet to about 30 feet as it is now. This is just going to make it worse.
Thank you both very much.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Worship, next few speakers are Glenn Smith and Adam Rabeda.
Glenn Smith, 21352 Smith Crescent, Milner, Mayor Woodward, and Township of Langley councillors. Last month, I had detailed to you in writing some concerns we had about the proposed rezoning and development. Specifically, potential drainage water impacts, excess removal of trees, volume and flow of traffic on Smith Crescent, and escalation of rural-urban conflicts. To put this proposal into perspective, the current zoning allows for about 65 residences. This rezoning proposal allows for about 349 residences. That's over 5 times what the current zoning allows for. We believe it would be good to maintain a transition zone between comprehensive high-density zoning and land that's zoned for agriculture. While we see that there's 45 to 90-foot buffers around the proposed development, farming practices may result in noise, dust, or smell that do not dissipate at borders. Some may argue that normal farming practices fall under the right to farm legislation, and that's true. But right to farm legislation does not eliminate nuisance complaints that may come from high-density residences. It would be a good idea if serious consideration be given to maintaining the current zoning to facilitate a transition between high-density residential and agricultural zone land, to help ensure the long-term operational sustainability of agriculture in this area. And thank you for listening. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Adam Rabeda. I apologize if I yawn. I just got off a plane and it's 4 a.m. in my time zone, Europe. So, good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending tonight's meeting to share your thoughts on this project. As a property owner and recent resident of Langley, I would like to share my thoughts with you on why I fully support this project. To respect everyone's time, I have prepared 5 brief but significant bullet points I would like to share with you. First, transport infrastructure and community space. As the fastest growing municipality in Metro Vancouver area, which is projected to double in population in the next 20 years, infrastructure and transportation is key. This project will contribute $9 million to the Community Amenity Contribution Fund and will provide much needed capital to create new community spaces which will enhance quality of living for the Township of Langley for all residents. It will also help with much needed transport infrastructure in the area. Immigration, housing demand, and affordability. Between January to March 2023, BC has seen over 23,000 new immigrants, with the vast majority coming to Metro Vancouver. And for example, the Willoughby neighborhood is having 250 plus new residents per month. By providing 349 townhomes, this development will help to address the housing demand by expanding housing supply and improving housing affordability. Local business and employment opportunities. A project of this magnitude will provide new opportunities for local businesses, jobs, all kinds of construction jobs, retail jobs, and service jobs. Environmental. As an example, Willoughby Town Center is Langley's first and only pedestrian-oriented mixed-use community. This project could be Langley's second example of how to provide great quality of living with reducing greenhouse gases by providing a second pedestrian-oriented community. With Willoughby community receiving approximately 60% of all new single and multifamily housing units built in the Township of Langley, and this trend expected to continue, this proves that pedestrian-oriented communities are in high demand and beneficial not only for the local residents, but for all of GVRD and our environment. Heritage and history. From what I understand, this project will restore the, and I might butcher the name, McGillivray Heritage Home, and use it as a landmark to highlight the history of this neighborhood. In conclusion, a smart city is a city where humans, trees, birds, and other animals can grow with all their glories, imperfections, freedoms, and creativity. They are not just cities of technology, but cities of history, dignity, freedom, and with this project, I believe that we are one step closer to building our smart city. Thank you.
Worship, the next 2 speakers are Martin Donaldson and Diane Kask.
Martin Donaldson.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. First time I've done something like this. I've lived in Prestwick, which is on the east side of 210th Street for the last 7 years. And I've seen a tenfold growth in traffic. Every morning when I go to work off of 210th and then make the right-hand turn on 72nd Avenue, the number of potential accidents with the existing road system is very, very high. And I get that we need more housing and everything else and all the rest of that good stuff, but I think the roadway on 72nd needs to be increased in size to handle the traffic and what we got now and what's going to be in the future. Like, why are we stopping with 4 lanes? I think it's 203rd, and then from there it's going single lane. I think it's got to carry through. And Crush Crescent, I agree with somebody else that was talking here earlier. It's a nightmare during the wintertime. It's bad. I mean, I've got a four-wheel drive and sometimes I can't even make it up. So, with regards to one part of the map that I see there, and also I've seen signage, okay, it shows 72nd Avenue going through to Smith Crescent when in fact it doesn't. So I'm hoping, you will listen a little bit or take under consideration in the widening or making the roads better from 203rd on, so that's 4 lanes all the way down. I don't know why it stopped there, but that's by the fire hall. But I think if the fire hall stays there, they're gonna have a problem with traffic if this gets any, bigger, if the traffic gets more. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Diane Cask, Aldergrove, Mayor and Council. I disagree with the proposal to rezone this land to allow 349 townhouses. This land is on a slope that is already subject to increased flooding, and building townhouses in the area would increase the risk of flooding the lower farmland. The lower farmland belonging to Milner Valley Cheese on Smith Crescent has had problems with flooding since the trees were cut down on Terra Farms years ago, just near there. Farmland is precious in BC and Canada. Any development which negatively affects farmland should not happen. Just building on this property will increase the flood risk, but now increasing the density makes the farmland that much more vulnerable. Rezoning would add more impervious ground cover. This needs to be halted. Even without increasing the development to townhouses, there needs to be further restrictions placed on development of the site to encourage runoff to sink into the ground rather than flood the lower fields. Another concern with this development is traffic. Coming off of Smith Crescent onto Glover would be very dangerous. And going from Smith Crescent onto Crush Crescent is also very dangerous. There's no safe way here. With the newer 216th interchange already causing more traffic congestion at Glover, there needs to be adequate traffic routing to take into consideration the increased population in the area. Also, this land is close to ALR, and the buffer is not adequate to separate farmland from townhouses. If this land is to be developed, consider leaving space for large trees to be planted and grown to hold back the bank. Separate residential and farmland and encourage water to flow into the ground. Also use permeable ground cover within the development to decrease flooding. Do not allow construction to begin before traffic lights at Smith and Glover are put in where you can go both ways. Even vehicle-activated lights would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Your worship, the last member of the public listed is David Davis, and then the proponent.
Well, what an honor. So I had the pleasure of sitting next to Councillor Davis for 2 years. Councillor Davis, welcome.
Likewise.
To
Thank you.
to me, you're always going to be Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis, go ahead.
I noticed you were 3 minutes late starting this meeting. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is David Davis, and I live at 21782 76B Avenue. I believe that this proposal will affect our community, and I'm here tonight to let you know that I am opposed to the development proposal R01000242. I have 3 points to discuss. I'm going to keep it at a very high level. There was lots of detail here. One is traffic. It seems to 349 homes. Everyone has 2 cars. That's 700 cars, and it's well over 1,000 people. It'll put pressure on Crest Crescent, Smith Crescent, and 210. We have an issue already at 72nd and Crush. The last proposal, it doesn't show it there. Well, it kind of does, but the last proposal has widened 72nd and it stops right in the corner and then goes right into 2. And I think you're aware of that. That is one thing that has to be dealt with. Geez, I can't even think here. 50 years ago, I came down that road on a pair of roller skates, and I passed Crush Crescent and Smith Crescent, and Earl Mufford was following me and clocked me at 40 miles an hour. If you take a truck and try to go up Crush Crescent at 140,000 or whatever, and you stop them there, they're not going to like you. Like and if vice versa, as pointed out. So traffic is an issue. Second thing, stormwater was quite a bit talked about. I farm land on Smith Crescent, and when Terra was clear-cutted, and we all know what happened up there, the games were played, I immediately noticed that there was no water retention. It's obvious. Water would flow down the hill and totally impact the field on Smith Crescent, which is just out of sight there. We farmed it for a long time, and we didn't have a water problem, but that year that Terra was cut down, I took pictures up on the hill there, and I had a couple of other councillor members at the time out, and to show the gushers that were coming down. So water is huge. We lost about 60 feet of the field for a year or two, and then I dug up a drain that that young man's great-grandfather probably put in, and the drain hadn't seen the light of day probably for what could have been 100 years. The drains aren't prepared to take any extra water. Smith Crescent Road, or Smith Crescent ditch, it has to go into a 16-inch pipe, so it isn't going to work to get it another 100, 200 feet into the creek that the other gentleman here talked about. So it's going to be an impact. If water is drained on the south side of 72nd, when Milner Heights was put in, they beefed up, the taxpayers paid to relocate a huge culvert, 6-foot culvert, and it had to go down World Crescent, and it dumped an awful lot of rain, and we even the township had to pay to go underneath the railroad to get water because it was flooding the railroad onto the other side, and that comes out at Kwantlen College. And it's really hard to get maintenance crews out when people don't agree and want and let you come onto their land and give a covenants to clean out the ditches. So that's going to cause a lot of problems. My dad used to say it's hard to get a gallon of water in a quart jar. Okay, I should just... Okay, number 3, and I'm just about done. 72nd makes a great buffer, and we talked about buffers. You need to have a good buffer. It separates urban sprawl and ALR land. Buffers can't have houses on them. I've seen proponents come forth and say, well, if you put 30 houses right along that side of the 30 houses, that's the buffer. But if the houses were left empty, it'd be fine. But it's the people in the houses that cause problems. And there's always conflict, urban-rural conflict. And I'm no exception. We were spreading manure the other day, and agriculture has to be absolutely have to have a buffer. And Councillor Ritt would know that when people come to your establishment on ALR land, if you don't get a drink in them real fast, and it's things like chicken veneer, they don't want to hang around. Okay, that's kind of a joke. I'm sorry. It's going to affect how we farm, how I'm going to farm, and I just rent the land. To quote the late Mark Warwa, and he used to, when he moved to the Milner Heights, I would see him on Smith Crescent. Of course, I'd park the truck or the car in the middle of the road and stop him and have a good chit chat. And a couple of times he was on his bike. And I'm going to quote him, "We have a great jewel in the Milner Valley," and it was the Smith Crescent. It doesn't cost a lot of money to maintain because there's no maintenance on it. It's half an inch NDP blacktop, and it's not meant to have extra traffic. And traffic will go the easiest route, and it will cause problems there. So thank you very much.
I have a question.
Oh, you do?
Well, I don't, but Councilor Richter does. Councilor Richter.
Hi, Councillor Davis. I remember when you brought those pictures to council showing the water that had come down. Now, is the property that you farm or that you rent and take hay off, or is it in this photo somewhere?
It's just on the corner. Yes, right there. That's where Smith Crescent goes towards Glover Road.
Oh, okay.
And that's not prepared. That ditch. When I was a youngster, I used to cut hay up on that hillside, and it's a steep hill. And that ditch is not prepared to take that much, unless you reduce the density and put pits in. You know how they put pits in driveways and front lawns so that you can retain the water better. That's just in my opinion, but that's the water's got to go somewhere.
Yeah. And now, in all the time that you've lived here, and you've lived here a long, long time, have you seen any issues with destabilization of that slope? And it's quite a steep slope, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the slope actually goes all the way along. And that top piece, we call it the Terra Hill, 21260, that was the best toboggan slope you ever had. But that's hard to farm, but everything you farm has its challenges. I mean, it can be done. But if you looked at it today, they've got some high-hos in there just beside it, and you'd think the stabilization would be, but myself, no, I didn't see any slouches. But maybe we're just really close. Maybe I didn't see any, but it could happen.
Okay.
I've seen it.
And the last question is, when you talk about that buffer between ALR and residential, on this particular property, would you say it's like half of that subject property or a quarter of it?
Of a buffer?
Yeah, for like agriculture versus.
Well, the township has policies of what the buffers are.
Yeah.
But buffers, when you put them in, and I've heard rumors that 208th is going to be punched open, and I know this is off subject, but Bob Long's not here, he won't shut me down. They're going to take that buffer out and put a drainage pond down in the Berry farm. So buffers have to stay in place. They have to be effective, and they stay in place. And buffers are effective, if they're done properly. But to say how much of a buffer, we have buffers, you know how big buffers, they're set out, and we've worked years and years on them, and
Great.
needs a buffer.
Yeah. Well, we miss you here.
Well, thanks for the comments. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, just one more thing, appreciate that. 208th Street being finished, not a rumor, it's gonna happen. Okay. Thank you again.
I'll just zip it.
Yeah, good.
We did a lot of work on 208 before the last election.
Not enough, apparently. Okay, thanks. Next speaker. Is that it for the
Your
vote?
worship, that concludes the public individuals noted on the list.
Great. Is there any other members of the public wish to make a submission? Any other submissions from the public? Yep, please come forward. We just need your name and neighborhood for the record.
My name is Keith Rosenberg, and I live in Willoughby. I've been in Langley since '06 and moved out from Richmond when starting a young family and starting to grow, my family grow. I've moved out with my daughter. I grew up in Richmond and quickly found out I couldn't afford to stay there. So I started my own business, and we found Langley as a good place to move to. And as we've seen Langley grow, I've been in support of the developments that have been proposed because there's places out here that are for affordability and for a good community. We found Langley as being the best place to come to. As for the roads around the area, yeah, they need to be upgraded 100%. I have a son who comes from my house on 72nd and wants to ride his bike to a buddy's place on 208th. I'm not so keen on him riding his bike to 208th. So 208th, 72nd, Crush, those all need to be upgraded. But I do find that with this project put in place, that can get the ball rolling and hopefully it gets pushed through. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other submissions from the public? For a second time, are there any other submissions from the public? And for a third and final time, are there any other submissions from the public? So with that, I'll ask, is there any submissions with the proponent wishes to make? Please come forward.
Honorable Mayor, respected councillors, my name is Jimmy Hansra. I'm a resident of Surrey and I'm the agent on the file. So I'll take you through some of the history of this project and how it came to be what we see today, and a little bit more of the information that has been asked for, and we'll try to put that in as better context as we can to provide more information for us to make a decision moving forward. As you know,
Did we get your name and
yes,
and neighborhood? Can you say it again, please?
Jimmy Hansra.
Okay.
From Surrey.
And the company name?
IOM Property Group.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So at large, before this, we went out of the community at large in Langley, and we got about 70 plus support emails and forms that were submitted to Township as well. So there's a positive feedback that we received from the community at large on this particular project. And as you know, I'll take you back a little bit about why the special study area was here. As you all know, at the time of NEGI, neighborhood plan was established. There was an ALC commission report that was in place. So hence the area was deemed to a special study until that report was finalized. Back in 2018, the lands that we see north of 212 connector was released from ALR, and now we have a connector road going through. And since that 2018 and 2019 early on, we started working closely with township staff on the redevelopment and proposal of this special study area as a whole. We started off with the subject site towards the left, the 4 parcels, and slowly, together with the guidance of township, we acquired other parcels to make it a more comprehensive plan because it just lacked overall growth in that area. And because of the tapers of the ground, we wanted to make sure that we completely look at all the other details and technical sides when it comes to environment, slope stability, and so what before we present a plan together. So in lieu of that, in essence, the detention pond that we're proposing here captures this particular special study as a whole, which will definitely hold all the water to maintain the pre and post development. Together with the consultants that we have on board, we'll make sure that those things are also looked at in a technical way. I'm not the expert, but we have the right professionals looking at this project as well. They'll work in the detailed design stage after this is pushed through. In terms of the overall planning, early 2019, since we started working with Township, it's been over 4 years. And you see that the site we have developed under the guidance of staff, we have looked at a few other highlights that we see. Maybe, Mr. Stephen, if you can put the site plan, that'll be better for me to go through that. Yes. So I'm going to highlight some of the highlights of where we are here in this one. In terms of NEGI plan that was originally established in 2006, the densities were set forth and it was kind of put on froze because the ALC Commission was on board. Until then, we know that a lot has changed in the community and there's need for housing is growing. So this is the need of the hour of this particular area. And what we have done here is the infrastructure alone, like I mentioned on the detention stands alone, to make sure that the water is collected. And there's a lot of discussions on the trees as well. There is, has been established, there's over 502 significant trees on the site. 418 of those is actually on-site tree plantation. That was on one property towards the top left corner. And yet, under the bylaws, counted as significant trees. So as you can see, the rest of the slopes and rest of the properties don't have a lot of tree cover on them. So in terms of replacing these, as per the bylaw, we're going to be proposing to put 462 trees spread across the development to make sure everything's stable. In addition to that, we have done tree plantations all across the world and in Township Langley and Surrey. In lieu of our obligation to the replacement trees, we have also proposed that we are prepared to conduct 2 plantings per annum, spring and fall, about 1,000 trees and shrubs north of our property at the passive park that Township is looking at until everything's refurbished. And I believe that will also increase the stability of the entire area and improve the water flow and quality in this particular area as well. So that's one of the things that we will plan to do as we move forward on this project. Another thing, as we know, that the CSE's of $9 million has been provided to help the community amenities in this landship as well. That will help in this whole neighborhood to grow. The heritage home we speak of that has been proposed to restore, we'll move it to that corner, and we'll put up close to $1 million in restoration works to make sure that gets done. And in fact, on that note, we have a few vandalisms on that heritage home. So we will encourage the council to allow us to move it forward quickly so we can salvage the property and restore it to what we believe we should in that corner. We discussed roads, of course. The part of the development will upgrade the roads on 72, and this could be a part of the puzzle on the overall road structure. When the 208 is being developed, it'll allow the flow of the traffic, and we'll make sure that that'll definitely help on the steepness of the slopes that we discussed here, and we can together work with Township and Langley transportation staff to make sure safety is done at this corner as we develop the property. Environment, we speak of environment as well. We work together with an environmental consultant to provide a SPIA just on that right side of the detention pond, and that new water course and with the SPIA together, it improves the overall quality of water and also the ecosystem as a whole in this area. Keeping in lieu of the sensitivity of the environment in this neighborhood, that was also considered as part of that proposal as well. So we're going to be proposing that as part of the development. In terms of the slopes we discuss, we are following the natural contours of the slopes and the designs. That will allow least amount of excavation, least amount of slope stability changes to the site. We can definitely look at design guidelines, and this is as per the rezoning application alone. After this application goes through, the development permit application will look at all the other details that has to go in place, including the NCP guidelines that we speak of, the special study area, which talks about pedestrian pathways and connectivity to the parks, and overall livability in the area will be improved as a whole as part of the prerequisite that we have on this file. So in conclusion, we would hope that you guys allow us to move this forward, and we'll do our part in the design guidelines and the detailed designs to make sure that this whole area gets an uplift from where we are today. And in lieu, we can resolve a lot of the other concerns that we have from the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So I have some questions from council. So
Yeah, please.
Councilor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for being here. I had a question in regards to the planning rationale, besides just increasing the number of units delivered, why there wasn't a bit more of a transition from a townhouse form on the west side of the project up at the slope as you move down towards the farmland, as opposed to going to a single family type, why it was townhomes all the way through?
It allows two things. One is the buffer, of course, with the ALR that we're proposing as per the guidelines of township, that was maintained. And the other one is the site closer to the ALR buffer is steeped, hence it's away from the natural graded sanitary on the other side as well. So we have to put a pump station to service those particular properties in that area. As a strata unit, it makes a lot more easier and better for the design part as well. Instead of having single family homes, a lot of instability of the soil, this can be maintained with the outdoor amenity space that we're provided to kind of provide an overall look and maintain that look from the outside as we look over the valley.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I just had a question. So on the bend in the curve there, just above where it says Crush Crescent, is that an entrance? Is that the main entrance to the development?
So there are two entrances proposed in this one. One is
Right.
off 210
Yeah.
for the lot A part, which is the majority of the construction. And we have another one on Smith Crescent, next to that site there, and that'll be the access for the lower portion of the site. And in between the two, we'll have an emergency access that will look more closely with the planning staff to make sure there's in case of emergency, there is a back and forth between the two lots, if need be, for the fire access.
Okay, so that gap there just on 72nd and Crush, what is that? Is that not an access to the development?
Sorry, which one?
So I'll clarify, Councillor Kunst, no, it's not. What it's showing there is the current old 72nd Avenue
Okay.
road that would be potentially consolidated with this property.
I see.
It's
Okay.
the old road that's being overlaid over the
Yeah,
site plan.
the green color is not really gone through because that is an existing road, but that 4.5 meter walkway will actually extend all the way through, and there's no access from anybody coming into that because of the low visibility access. That whole thing will just be a 72nd Avenue road.
Okay, so the only two access then is just on Smith and on 209.
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
210, I believe.
Sorry.
210.
210 and
210,
Smith
right.
Crescent, yes.
Councillor Richter?
Yes, thank you. So you're the agent for the company and you're coming from Surrey. So the first question that I've got, has your company put a housing development of this density on a slope of this magnitude? Does your company have experience building density on sharp slopes?
Councillor Richter, we have done very complicated projects in our past 30 years of experience, and believe this slope of the townhome development is not complex. We are more than capable of handling that. We have the right professionals on board to make sure the slope stability analysis has been done. We already had a chat with the geotechnical consultant before we presented this over the last.
But has your company built on a slope before?
Yes.
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 Okay, a slope this steep?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Now, there were some questions that came up with regards to the traffic that the residents have expressed concerns about. And I wanted to know exactly what upgrades you are doing on 72nd and if you are doing any upgrades on Smith Crescent as well.
We will get the details, working closely with staff and township staff of the transportation department as well to understand the upgrades needed for the final adoption of this particular file. So as we move this forward and we receive the conditions and we go through the details of the township staff, we will be able to better understand the upgrades required for this project. As I know for now, 72nd Avenue is being upgraded to the full road. It will allow access through there. And Smith Crescent is also looked at being upgraded to make sure that we are providing adequate support on the road structure for the traffic that will be coming from this development.
Okay, so when you say upgraded, do you mean you're building the roads wider, more lanes?
We will get the guidance from township transportation on that, and then we'll be doing our duty to make sure it's done.
Okay, and what about surfacing to deal with cold weather and snow events? Any special surfacing you might put in?
We will work with township transportation and the engineering experts to guide us on what is required to make sure that everything is safe and adequate for long term.
Okay, and will there be any kind of traffic lights that you're going to put in?
At this point,
allow traffic in and out?
we are proposing lights at that intersection of Smith and Crush, and then again we'll work together with transportation to see what's the best way to move this forward and how the light structure would work. And we'll work with them on that as well.
So there's going to be a light at Smith and Crush. What about a light at 72nd and 210th?
There will be also a light there. We'll work together. Like
Yeah.
I said, it's something that we will work in tandem with and Township.
Okay, and my last question is you mentioned something about trees, in lieu trees. So the replacement trees, you're taking down 500 plus trees. The in lieu trees are going to be planted on this property or not?
Yes, as part of the Township code report in terms of the bylaws, we're proposing 462 replacement trees count for the area, the area that we have here.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we will be doing 1,000 tree plantations per year, twice a year, and we can do that working together with the staff at the location, and we would like to propose the passive park north of our site would be an adequate location. If you can go back, Mr. Richardson, on the other map, and you'll be able to see that there's a lot of vacant bearing lands on the right-hand side of the passive park, and we would like to plant those as trees, and that will also help in the overall natural slope stability and the water flow as well, as we'll be able to get more infiltration done.
Okay, and so you're actually going to plant 462 trees on that red property there?
That's right.
And what type of trees will they be?
We will work together with the landscape architect and township to guide us on what type of trees is adequate on this, and then we will go do the same.
Okay, so
I'm not an expert.
You don't know if they're conifers or deciduous?
We will work together with township to guide us on that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Great, so thank you. So with
Thank you,
that,
sir.
thank you. With that, I'll close the public hearing on item C1. Is there anybody from council that would like to consider third reading for this? No, I'll move that. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rent. So I'm going to call the question on considering C1. That carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Kuntz, and Councillor Pratt opposed. So I'm going to move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Martins. So I'm not seeing any speakers. I felt it would be, I think, a good thing for residents to know that, to not, for 2 weeks, not know what this future this is going to be. So I have a referral back to staff. And I believe the feedback we heard here tonight is consistent with what we've been receiving by email for a great period of time. So, Ms. Bauer, I have a referral back to staff that I'd like to move. That the application be referred back to staff for further consideration with the proponent to 1, reduce the permitted density on the easterly portion of the site from 22 units per acre to 15 units per acre or less as may be appropriate for council to consider. Number 2, provide an improved and high-quality urban ALR interface buffer on the northerly and easterly portions of the site with additional green spaces on the easterly property line. Number 3, provide for a quality trailhead at the north property line where the east and west portions of the site meet. And number 4, convert the currently proposed Smith Crescent vehicular access to an emergency-only entrance with consideration of 2 vehicular entrances off of 210th Street and a suitable, appropriate internal vehicular network subject to BC Building Code considerations, cross-access easements, and an appropriate subdivision pattern as may be appropriate for council to consider. Is there a seconder to that referral? Seconded by Councillor Martins. So with that, Councillor Richter.
Okay.
On the referral.
On the referral, I'm opposed to the referral because you've got a very lengthy referral motion there that I have not seen in writing, and I'm just hearing it for the first time. And I don't think it's fair for council to be dealing with this when we haven't even had a chance to see it. So I'm opposed to the referral because I don't think you're doing proper due diligence and giving proper respect to all council members in order to review things and make a fully informed choice on third reading.
No, I understand. I mean, I weighed that decision amongst having residents wonder what was going to happen for 2 weeks, and I felt that this was the appropriate thing. The referral's in order. Councillor Kunst.
So I guess you've had a little time to look at your referral, and I'm just hearing it now. This is a really sensitive area. I used to live just down the street from Smith Crescent. I understand the slopes and the traffic. I can't imagine that we don't have a little more time to really thoughtfully consider what's going to happen on that piece of property in that development. And I can't even remember what your referral is because I was just thinking, oh well, this won't go to third reading. This is just going to, we'll have a little time to contemplate what we're going to do there. So, yeah, I'm not really prepared to support the referral, although it might be a really great referral.
Okay. We can have the clerk read it back if you wish, or
I just need time to think about it, and so I'm not going to support the referral at this time.
So if it'd be the will of council, of course. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I kind of was surprised myself that we were going to third reading, but if you'll indulge me, I just kind of want to work through that referral that you made. Going through some of the concerns, and I really appreciated the chance to actually get to tour the site and see the concerns firsthand. So there was a piece there about vehicular access off Smith, correct?
That's correct.
That's going to be theoretically eliminated, made to only emergency access.
That's correct.
Per that referral.
That's correct. So the vehicular access of the Smith would be removed, and that requires a density increase on the easterly half.
That requires a density increase.
Sorry, decrease.
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 Right. Okay. So then all the traffic will be directed onto 210, which will eventually be connected to the 212 connector to the north.
The 212 connector and a connection through to 210 will provide vehicular access. I don't think with these changes we would see much traffic on Smith from this development.
With a 15 units per acre density on the easterly portion.
Or less,
Or less.
as required to achieve that traffic flow.
Is there a reason why that ceiling is so high? Because at 15 UPA, that's still a townhouse type usually.
Yes. So it's my understanding staff will work on this with the proponent, and the densities will be that or less, and that's intended to set a ceiling that council is going to willing to consider.
And there was something about a trail.
Yeah, so there's number 3, provide a quality trailhead at the northern property line where the east and west portions of the site meet, which connects to the Passive Park Township property to the north.
So if I understand that correctly, and we're looking at this map where the dark brown red line at the top of the subject site
so where you see
slopes down.
Where you see it connected to the property currently labeled RU3, there would be a desire to be able to get from Crust Crescent and Smith Crescent through a new trail network up to connect to the Passive Park bordered on RU3.
Okay. And was there something else I missed in that referral?
Then there's also an increased urban ALR interface buffer on the northern and easterly portions of the site. Much feedback came in to improve the ALR buffering at this particular location, given the topography.
Right.
And lots of feedback came in on that over the previous weeks. So that's intended to address that.
And when this referral comes back, is it coming back at third or is it coming back at first and second?
So we're not granting third. So we've had the public hearing. This will be referred back. None of these referral items would trigger another public hearing. So it would come back for third reading with revisions based on this referral.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Van Popte?
Yeah, so referral makes sense. I don't think anybody at this table has an appetite to approve it as it is. So whether we refer it back now or sit on it and refer it later, it doesn't make sense. So it makes sense actually to refer it now. All of the things that are in the referral motion actually speak to the concerns that we've had. And so, I just don't think that we should delay and cause anxiety within the area and the residents who are concerned about this. I think it's great that they know now that we're taking this serious and that we want to see revisions to it as well.
That's my intent, not to have residents spend 2 weeks wondering what's going to happen. Councilor Kunst.
Can we also include a covenant for people not to complain about the smell of farms?
Would you like a covenant when they purchase their property that they're recognizing that they're purchasing land
I kind of
adjacent
would.
to farmland? Yeah.
I kind of would.
Yeah. Me too. We can certainly add that at third reading if it is successful. Councilor Kunst. Is there any other discussion on the referral? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the referral. C1. That carries with Councilor Kunst and Councilor Richter opposed. Mr. Richardson, item C2.
Thank you, Your Worship. My colleague, Mr. Jensen, will provide introductory remarks with respect to this item.
That's great. And I also want to thank you, Mr. Jensen, on all the work that your department has been doing with Mr. Chu and Mr. Cooner on this item. It's, in my opinion, a fabulous reform. So I appreciate all the work you've done on it.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors and members of the public. Bylaw number 5887 proposes to consolidate 68 land use designations in 10 neighborhood plans in Willoughby into a reduced total of 40 land use designations. Update single-family and commercial land use designations through policy that requires rear-loaded vehicle access for single-family lots and prohibits the development of commercial strip malls. Standardize the method for measuring density by using a unit per acre calculation for single family and townhouse designations and a floor space ratio calculation for apartment development. Also proposed is a standardized definition of developable land. Bylaw number 5887 also proposes to improve provisions for density averaging for sites with split land use designations and to remove the energy conservation and GHG development permit area requirements. Public notification for bylaw number 5887 included newspaper ads which ran on June 15th and June 22nd. There have been no written submissions received from the public, and there are no speakers on the speakers list.
Does any members of council have any questions? Councilor Richter, go ahead.
Okay, so we're reducing the number of existing 68 land use designations to 40. Okay, in real terms, what is that going to mean?
It's an alignment of terminology for the most part. So across the 10 neighborhood plans, they were all created at different points in time. So single family might have had several different names. So this is just taken the naming convention and just standardized it into one name for single family across all the neighborhood plans. So same for apartment and townhouse. So each of them had slight little tweaks: townhouse A, townhouse B, townhouse C, townhouse D. So it just standardized those while keeping the densities the same.
Okay.
So now, as an example, there's still single family, but at 6 UPA, single family at 8 UPA, single family at 12 UPA. So there's still many different single family, but it's been able to reduce it by quite a number.
The number of designations.
The number of designations have been reduced.
Okay, so in terms of downstream impact that could be negative, are there any downstream impacts that could be negative that would come out of this?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay.
We've looked at applications that are in stream. So we've looked at the changes that we're making, looked at the applications in stream to see if there's any complication that might arise from applications that have already received third reading, and we found none.
Okay, so there's no chance that, say, somebody who's got an application in process, if we push this through, might be upset that their application gets tweaked?
There was 8 applications that are in that zone where if there was a change that impacted it, it would have to go back through the public hearing process again, and we found that none of them would have to go back.
Okay, and is this the first presentation that you've given to council, or anybody's given to council on this?
Correct.
Okay. I'm just wondering why. Normally when we have a housekeeping one, it doesn't come through to us at a public hearing. It comes through to us at first and second with some sort of an explanation.
There was a report, but no presentation given at that time.
No presentation given, okay.
Quite a lengthy report from what I remember.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much. I'm a little leery after the tree protection bylaw revisions about how people can now pay to cut down as many trees as they want. I'm a little leery about going through with housekeeping provisions that we don't fully understand, but thank you.
Well, I want to thank you. I've seen other questions, Council. I want to thank you. I understand them, and I certainly appreciate them. And one example I can give is the elimination of the strip mall designation. Would that be fair? That led to the creation of that strip mall at 204th and 80th. Those would no longer be permitted. We've modernized the single-family definition such that rear lanes will be more common than they have been so far. And theoretically, a lot of mistakes that proponents may or not be making because of so many different neighborhood plans with slightly different definitions, that hopefully we would reduce the mistakes and the burden on our staff to process these applications. Yeah, so great, thank you.
Correct. All right, thank you.
So with that, I'm going to call for submissions from the public for a first time. Are there any submissions from the public for a second time? And for a third time, are there any submissions from the public? So with that, I'll close the public hearing on C2. I'll move considering third and final at this meeting, seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any there's no discussion on that. I'll call the question on that. C2. I'm assuming, were you opposed to that, Councillor Richter? Yeah, okay, so that carries with, of course, Councillor Richter opposed. So that will, I'll move third and final reading. Third reading is there, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Richter.
Okay, I'm a little concerned with the pace that things are being rammed through here. and particularly in what is intended to be a public hearing. Mr. Mayor, you just said that you understand the changes, but I would like to remind you that you're just one of 9 people that make a decision here. And I don't think it's fair that you're throwing notices of motion on, or you're getting things done here that none of us, or at least I wasn't, informed about would be happening before tonight's meeting. I've said it before today, I'm going to say it again. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's proper process. Thank you.
Yeah, so Mr. Richardson, can you clarify that sort of suggestion about process that the Local Government Act and our procedure bylaw allows for the contemplation of third and final readings based on the nature of the application at the conclusion of public hearing? Can you outline that for us, please?
Yes, certainly, Your Worship. So the proposed plan amendments proceeded in their regular course for first and second reading. Given their nature, they require a public hearing. Public hearing has just been concluded. Council, due to their procedures bylaw, can consider third and final reading at this time.
And that's also provision within the Local Government Act, I understand. Is that
That's correct.
That's correct. And do we receive any negative submissions on this bylaw that we're aware of?
No, Your Worship, and maybe for further clarity, so third and final reading will be available given that there are compliant amendments.
Yeah, thank you. Councilor Van Popten, go ahead.
Yeah, this isn't new to me. I feel very well versed on this. I don't feel like it's being rammed through. We've talked about it at this table, actually, and received a very lengthy report in which I actually read. And, and I spoke about being excited that we can actually get some cohesive terminology within our community plans in the Willoughby area. I can't fully remember when first and second came to the table. I don't know if it was maybe during Councillor Richter's absence or what, but I have a very different feeling on this one, that this has gone through due process, and there's been lots of opportunity for us behind the scenes to get more information if required, and so I'm happy that we can get this through and get this done.
Yeah, great. Councillor Richter?
Just a point of order or privilege or something. I don't think we have to, point names or point fingers and call names and do cutting little remarks when we're addressing an issue. Let's just stick to the issue. I think that's the respectful way to proceed.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I think there was a suggestion that somehow this was an unfair, incorrect process. So I feel that had to be addressed. So I certainly support the amendments. I certainly think they're fabulous. If these had been done last term, a few years ago, we could have prevented a strip mall at 80th and 204th. We had a 15-acre strip mall under application currently, and the Williams neighborhood plan that these amendments will now demonstrate are not the designations that we're looking for. These have a number of improvements to modernize our bylaws and neighborhood plans from top to bottom, and they're long, long overdue. So with that, I'll call the question on C2. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Mr. Richardson, item C3.
Thank you, Worship. The subject Willoughby Community Plan and Yorkton Neighborhood Plan amendments and rezoning applications pertain to a residential development consisting of approximately 805 apartment units and 62 townhouse units at 7687 200 Street. The 12.26 acre site is designated multifamily in the Willoughby Community Plan, and apartment, townhouse, row house B, and streamside protection area in the Latimer Neighborhood Plan. This air photo depicts a site located on the west side of 200 Street, north of 76th Avenue. Proposed Willoughby Community Plan and Latimer Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 5888 accommodates apartments at a floor space ratio of 2.5 on the easterly apartment portion of the site at a maximum height of 6 stories. Proposed rezoning bylaw 5889 amends the existing suburban residential 2 zoning to comprehensive development zone 178 to accommodate the proposed apartment and townhouse uses. This slide indicates the proposed site plan with apartment units on the easterly portion of the site, east of proposed 180B Street, and townhouse units on the westerly portion of the site. Next series of slides are renderings, elevations, and landscape plan as indicated in Development Permit 101297 pertaining to the 2 apartment buildings adjacent to 200 Street. Staff recommends support of Willoughby Community Plan and Latimer Neighborhood Plan Amendment Bylaw 5888 and rezoning Bylaw 5889, subject to 14 conditions listed on page 9 of Council's agenda. Your worship, we're told 146 notices were mailed out, 1 written submission has been received, and there are no individuals noted on the speakers list.
Great. So with that, a call from any submissions from the public? And for a second time, any submissions from the public on C3? For a third and final time, any submissions from the public? With that, I'll close the public hearing for C3 unless the proponent would like to come forward and make any comments. Seeing that they will not. So with that, I'll close the public hearing on C3. I'll move that we consider third reading, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Call the question on C3. On the consideration of third reading of C3. That carries unanimously. I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on C3? Seeing none, I'll call the question on C3. That carries unanimously. With that, I get a motion to terminate? Yeah. Moved by Councillor Martins, seconded by Councillor Rent. All those in favor of termination, opposed, carried. Thank you very much.